This is what I'd call a medium-sized router, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a simple adjustable fence. So I start out by making a new base plate out of some 1/4 inch MDF, and I just simply copy the old one. Alright, got the new base plate made, and you see a couple of extra holes there. One will serve as an anchor and one will serve as a pivot. This will make more sense in a minute. Now, I can't really give you specific dimensions because there are simply too many variables with all the different size routers out there. But basically what you're wanting to do is create an arched cut in another scrap of MDF and start with a piece bigger than you need. You can always cut around it later. Now, of course, this piece with the arched cut will become the fence. Now, I hope this isn't confusing, but if you look closely, you can see a third scrap of wood. So the top piece is the part that has the pivot. I say top as related to this image, not to the orientation of how the router would be used. The second piece is the base, pivoted it out of the way for now. And the third piece underneath has a screw running into it. This acts as a temporarily holding place to make that pivot. Now, I take their base loose, and here's where that one of those extra holes comes into play. I drill a hole slightly smaller than a bolt, and I thread that through the base plate. Make sure it clears on the router. Here you can see it protruding, and this will ultimately become the pivot. At this point, you can determine a location to drill a hole that will go over the pivot. This will be easy to determine because the edge of the fence will be close to that hole, and then the fence will pivot away from the router bit. On this particular router, there was a threaded hole in the bottom of the router that wasn't part of the holes that hold on the base plate, and this is where I threaded in a knob. This acts as the adjustment. Now you probably noticed this is a plunge router, but a regular router would work as well. Alright, let's put this together. I got a 1/4 bolt in there. That'll go on there. Put all these guys in. Right. Somewhere. There we go. Bah. Worn out screw tip. Okay. Then this guy goes on. And a washer. Bolt's too short. Oh well. I put sandpaper on the bottom of that for, yeah, you guessed it, better gription. I mean, that's not even tight and it just grabs it, right? Especially when this guy goes on. So this is just going into a machine, metric machine threads in the base. And so now, tighten those up. I easily have an adjustable fence. Yeah. So here's another one. Works the same. You can see wing nuts. I have the wing nuts on this side. Bit of sandpaper, right? That adjusts. And there's no need to make the arch go past the bit for most situations. But yeah, fantastic. This is on a little Ryobi trim router. So I ended up changing out the screws, and I realized that they're metric. They're like a 4mm by 0.75mm thread pitch. Happens to be the same size that the light globes are held on ceiling fans. And another thing to note, if you need a machine screw to grab while you tighten the wing nut, just use a star washer underneath the head. Fantastic. All right, so I had a few DMs and some comments about this base plate. This is part of a video from Instagram. Maybe a little redundant, but may help. So let me show you how I did this. Take this off, wing nut, and this guy. So a lot of routers come with knobs. I just hang on to them. This is a metric thread, probably a 5mm by whatever, I don't know, I'm not sure. But anyway, so pull that guy off. Simple plate. This is just 1/4 inch MDF. Has like a melamine. It's really not melamine. It's called a cold roll. But anyway, just so it'd glide a little bit easier. And on this particular router, there was a cavity here. So I put a 1/4 bolt there, and instead of drilling the hole big enough for that to slip in, I drilled it maybe a 32nd small so it has to thread in. So when I tighten the wing nut, it won't just spin. And let me see if I remember. I think I used this hole right here. So to cut the slot, the arched slot, I use the base plate itself. I put a screw here. And I swiveled this out of the way. And I kind of knew I was going to have a bolt here. And so I had a hole there. And I thought, okay, my slot needs to be right in here. I just kind of guessed where the slot needed to be. But then I put one screw in the base plate. I think. Yeah, like that. Okay. Tighten that up a little bit. And then just a piece of scrap, and I utilize another hole in the base plate with the pivot point of the fence, and I just secured that. Okay. Okay, there we go. Of course, at this point, it didn't have sandpaper on it, so it's not going to slide easy for the demo. And then I moved this plate until it was somewhere in there, and then you can see once I liked where it was at, I tightened this guy up so that won't move. And this is just a pivot point, and then I simply plunged that through and made the slot. Right? So I use this base plate to make that slot. Pretty easy. Then I drilled about I don't know, inch and a quarter hole for the router bit. And then this dude, like I said, I made this a little bit snug. So I ended up using a longer bolt, and if you're a guy that wears belt and suspenders, you can add some epoxy. That guy goes on there, right? Okay. Pretty easy, right? And then this guy goes on here. Washer. Wing nut. Lost it. Why? It's just right here. Here it is. Okay. That dude goes on there. Then we'll do a demo. Another washer on this thing. And like I said, this had a threaded machine thread in there, so I just utilized that, the knob. So in use, you can see it's practicality, very useful, right? Let's make a slot. All right, so I changed the bit. I've got an 1/8 inch. This looks like an up spiral in there. It looks pretty dull, so the router's probably gonna scream, but it'll work for what we're doing. And got this guy. Let's clamp this dude in place. Just a beautiful piece of walnut. And I'm gonna bring the router bit down to the work. So it just makes contact, boom, right there. And then we'll set the plunge stop about, I don't know, 3/30 seconds deep. Somewhere in there, okay? And hearing protection. And the distance from the router bit to the fence is something arbitrary. I just put it, I just set it there. It's not, oops, forgot to tighten that. So it's about 5/16. So what I want to do, so I'm going to stop this about 5/16 plus. So we're gonna go around the corner. So let me plug this dude in. All right, so off camera, I cleaned up the corner with a chisel, right? Get that little burr off there. And I also cut some maple. And this is just slightly proud of the height. And it's about, well, that's an 1/8 inch bit. So this is 1/8 inch, right? So I also cut a miter, a couple of miters on there. So let's glue this in, yeah? And of course, if this was a real project, we'd be taking our time, getting the glue in right, yada yada, but this is really about the router and the router base and the functionality of it, right? Because that's ugly. Little glue on the miter. This might not be all that pretty, but you'll get the idea. All right, let that dry. We'll flush it up. So normally I would let this dry overnight. It's dried about an hour. So lots of ways to flush this up. You already know how I'm gonna do it. Let's get rid of that tail. Okay, put it in like that. So I've got a 120 grit, I believe, on this. I'll switch to a 180 grit. I don't know if you can see, but I can still see a little bit of that pencil line I'd made earlier. So I just barely hit that with 120 just to kind of flush things up, and then 180. That'll focus. Of course, there's color in the maple right where the miter is, but it is tight. But anyway, so you get the idea, right? So pretty handy little device. A lot of different applications. Thanks a ton for watching. Hope this helps. Enjoy a spectacular day. Ciao.